in collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
This week's programme is all about energy. We are way behind where we need to be when it comes to the efficiency of our buildings.
We have a big stock of buildings that need to be energy upgraded.
A research project at the University of Cyprus has been looking at how people can become involved in energy production and save money in the process.
The citizens to be able to take advantage of the leaps in technology and also to take advantage of the fact that you can get cheaper electricity from your solar system than to buy from the networks.
Under new legislation passed this week by the European Parliament, member states will have to reduce energy consumption by 11.7% by 2030. Cyprus, as we know, already lags far behind in the energy efficiency of its buildings, as Greens Party leader Bambos Theobemtou confirmed when I asked him about the situation.
Yes, the point is that we had an obligation to build almost zero energy buildings from 2021, but the fault, in inverted commas, of the directive is that it allows every country to define what is an almost zero energy building. And the Cyprus definition of an almost zero energy building is very, very relaxed. If you add this to the fact that we are perhaps the last country in Europe that had by law any minimum standards of insulation in buildings, you realize that we have a big stock of buildings that need to be energy upgraded.
But hang on a minute, you said that we all have different sort of ways of measuring this. Surely there must be a standardised way of saying, well, insulation will prevent so much loss and so on and so forth. How can we all come up with different ideas?
The directive allows every country to define what is an almost zero energy building. So in Cyprus, with the previous government, the ministerial decree that defines what is an almost zero energy building is very, very relaxed. It allows an energy consuming house to be built in Cyprus and be named as an almost zero energy building.
Sorry, does that mean that the new buildings that we've got that all have ratings when they go on the market as to their energy efficiency, actually those figures don't mean much?
Yes, but there is another worry, is that in that we do not check what the developer actually built. They issue the energy performance certificate on the application of the town planning permit before the building was built. So they give the developer the certificates before he builds the building. And it's extremely rare that we'll actually go and visit the building to see if the developer did what he promised in his application.
But that's ridiculous, Bambos, because am I not right in saying that all these things that need to be put in place to improve the energy efficiency of a building are much more expensive? And so if a developer can get away with having it on the plans but then not do it and nobody checks, presumably he's going to do it that way.
Of course, yes. That is very worrying. I try to convince the ministry to do other ways. You realize that they don't have the people to do this. I had a meeting with the minister and I asked him, if a company is going to do a development and build, for instance, 10 flats or 20 flats, and it's a development that will be worth, let's say, $1 million, it's very easy for him to pay a standard fee, a percentage, so that the government will hire an inspector. So if you're going to do a building which is, let's say, 1 million, you pay a percentage of that building to the government. The government will hire an independent somebody that will actually, independent energy guy, that will actually go and check the building and see that it's actually being built according to
specifications.
The permit. So, yeah, this is something that we need to be doing, but they don't do it. And it's also, to me, it's also a consumer right here, because when you hear the word almost zero energy building, you expect to move in a building, buy a flat that will actually that will have a very low cost in heating and air conditioning. And you don't, this is, if you like, cheating. It's like cheating.
Right, now then, we all know, I think, that heat and indeed cold are lost through windows, roofs and walls. So what should people be doing if they've got an oldish building and they want to try and make it more energy efficient? And then I want you to tell us about all these upcoming rules and the timetable the EU has set for a lot of this to happen.
Okay, if anybody wants any help with regards to the energy performance of their building, the best place to go to and ask is the energy agency, the Cyprus Energy Agency, which is an NGO set up specifically to help people and promote energy efficiency. So the Cyprus Energy Agency, which is the website is www.cea.org.cy. You have the contact details there. They are the guys to talk to when you want to make sure that you get the right advice on the performance of your building, what to do, if there is any funding, and anything related.
And do they charge for that service?
No, it's free.
Okay, now let's talk about the EU timetable, which is currently being discussed, I think, about the buildings, but also photovoltaics and zero emissions.
Okay, if one looks at the good country policy regarding energy, the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that you use less energy as possible. So it's very important to look at energy efficiency. So in Cyprus, we have the energy that we consume is energy in buildings, the public transport, and generation of electricity at the electricity authority plants. So if you are going to look at reducing the amount of energy that you use, the first thing to look at is look at public transport and buildings. And in Cyprus, we need to actually do a lot of work with regards to that. There was a directive that forced us in 2014 to energy upgrade all public buildings that we could. Every year we should be doing at least 3% of public buildings. We haven't done much with regards to that. And now we have the new directive that is coming in that they are discussing in Europe that will actually force us to get the buildings to be zero energy. And this will actually come very, very quickly because the assumption is that in all this time we actually upgraded to almost zero energy. So now, from almost zero energy, they expect that in 2026, we will have buildings that will be zero emissions. So that is the date that they are discussing now.
Well, we're going to get another reasoned opinion and end up in the European Court. There is no way that our public buildings are going to be zero emission in 2 years.
I don't see any way of implementing any of the things that they're discussing with the energy performance of buildings. And I collaborated with the President of Parliament about a month ago. We had an event and we had all the ministries that came up to Parliament and described their obligations. And the Ministry of Energy, it was obvious from the amount of work, you don't need to be very well studied in the subject to tell that there is no way that we're going to do all the things that they are planning to implement in the directive in the European Union. So I am very much aware of how strict these are, and I don't actually expect to be able to meet any of the obligations. For instance, they have 2026, all new public buildings will be zero emissions. 2027 will actually have all buildings in Cyprus to have a rating E, for instance. 2028, every building in Cyprus that is a housing building will actually be forced to have a PV system installed. And in 2028, we have all buildings should be zero emissions. All new buildings should be zero emissions. In 2030, all housing buildings should be category E and D. And in 2035, this is very important. Nobody will be allowed to have a central heating system that is based on gas or petrol. And this is giving a major push in Europe. For instance, in Germany, I was in a conference there in Parliament, and they were saying, the experts that they had there were telling us that there is so much push for heat pumps instead of petrol or gas-based central heating. They changed them and they put heat pumps, and there is so much demand on these. They had 25,000 vacancies in Germany just for installers.
Well, I want to talk to you in a moment about heat pumps, but are they going to be useful in Cyprus? Or if we have photovoltaics, and there's a joke there as well, isn't there? I mean, I've had an application in for the ones that are already on my roof to get them connected, and I'm still waiting about 4 months on. It's ridiculous. So are we not able to use our photovoltaic energy to turn our air conditioners into heaters, for example, in the winter?
Government tried to. There are a lot of people that are actually installing heat pumps here on the island. So what government actually did, they tried to stop this. And the idea they came up with was that they will not allow you to install a PV system on the roof that will cover more than 80% of last year's consumption. So that way, you wouldn't be able to increase the electrical load of the building and cover it with PV. Now they removed that. So what a lot of people are doing, especially people that have the roof area, is you install a heat pump that runs on electricity, and you include this when you calculate the size of the photovoltaic system that you install. That way, you cover the heating, the air conditioning, and the running of the house with the energy you produce on the roof.
Right, now then you need to explain heat pumps to us, I think. I'm not a scientist or an engineer. How do they work? So you're saying it's not, we call them heat pumps, but it's not just about heating, it can also be about cooling?
It's actually about heat. So it's a pump. What they do, the electricity that they consume is used not to heat the house or cool it. The electricity they use is to pump the heat from one side of the wall to the other. For instance, if you look at your air conditioning, all air conditionings are based on heat pumps. They work on the principle of a heat pump. They pump heat in the winter. They pump heat from outside into the house. And during the summer, they take the heat inside the house and they pump it outside the house. So because of the principle they work, they have an efficiency, that is the electricity that they use. They produce work that is 3 or 4 times bigger than what you actually consume. So this is why they are so popular.
And how many, if you know, houses or buildings here in Cyprus have installed heat pumps?
I talked to companies and architects about this, and they were telling me that for the last 1 or 2 years, most of the houses that are built are actually installing heat pumps, and they combine this with photovoltaic system. So it's getting to be very popular in Cyprus, and I expect it to be the thing to do very shortly, without any question.
And are we all going to have to get permission from a government department to do this? Because that's the thing that takes time, isn't it?
No, you don't need permission to remove your burner that runs on petrol and install a heat pump. It's very easy to do this. It's not a long process, and it's very easy to do because there are heat pumps designed specifically to go. You go into a normal heating system, like central heating system, and you remove the burner, the oil burner, and you install there the heat pump. If you want to use the heat pump to cool the house as well, then that is a different story because there is a lot more work to distribute the cool air inside the rooms.
But if I understood you correctly, if you've got radiators and a boiler, you can change the boiler and the radiators can be connected to the heat pump.
Exactly. Very easy change.
And how much do these heat pumps cost, Bambos?
At the time, the cost is very high. We're talking about 8,000 to 10,000 euro.
Oh, wow.
And this is, the difficulty here is because the price is driven up by the huge demand. There is so much demand, the prices went up. So if we are talking about having this obligatory within 10 years, for instance, you realize that the production will actually increase and the prices will actually drop a lot. The reason for this demand is, if you remember last year when we had the Russian invasion in Ukraine and we had these problems with the gas supplies in Europe, etc., everybody was changing to heat pumps. So there is a huge demand, and that actually drove the prices up.
Anybody on a low income isn't going to be able to afford to do this. What about the government? Is it going to be doing this in government buildings so that its own energy bill is lower and its buildings are more efficient?
I asked the government officially through parliamentary procedure. You'll see a lot of publications that came out after that criticizing the way that government is actually following the program of energy upgrading the public buildings. So we now have a change in government because I had no hope with the previous government. And I have a planned meeting with the minister. The ministry that is actually handling this is the Ministry of Energy and Commerce. They are actually responsible for the energy performance of buildings, but the energy upgrading of public buildings is done by the Ministry of Communication and Works because they have the Public Works Department.
Oh, there we go again. So it's another one where we're going to have to get two or three different departments to sit down and agree who does what. So that's not going to happen either.
And I need to say that I also visited some years ago the Ministry of Education, and I said to them, you have the obligation to build zero energy buildings, almost zero energy buildings, and this doesn't fit the type of schools that you actually build. So they were surprised, they didn't know this, and we have another mess in the Department of Education because they are not building school buildings that can handle the heat and the energy required to keep the classrooms cool in the summer.
There doesn't seem to be any long-term planning anywhere. Bambos, we have to leave it there. I'm sure we'll talk again at some point, but many thanks for joining me.
Thank you for the opportunity.
That's Bambos Theobemtrou, leader of our Green Party here in Cyprus. Several years ago now, I spoke to my next guest on this week's programme about a project that was called the MED Project for cost-effective rehabilitation of public buildings. Professor Georghiou joins me now because they've just held the final event, and I want to know what happened. George, thanks for joining me once again. First, for people who missed our interview because it was several years ago, can you just outline the idea behind the project? What was it trying to do?
Thank you, Rosie. I just want to say thank you also for inviting us again to talk about the project. Last time it was at the beginning and we were moving to uncharted waters, but now a few years later we are very happy and we are very proud to say that we have managed to succeed with the project. So what is Berlin about? Essentially, everyone is talking about solar energy, and we are saying solar energy can save the planet, can combat climate change. And what we have seen recently is explosive growth of the installations of photovoltaic systems. But now there is a new problem, the problem of the network, the electricity grid, which means that we cannot keep installing photovoltaic systems endlessly without thinking about the grid. And we're at the point where we need to make sure that the grid can accommodate this increased penetration.
Well, it can't at the moment, can it? Am I right in thinking that in actual fact we lose quite a bit of our res because it just goes to waste?
Absolutely, curtailment. And this is where Berlin comes in to give the solution. So Berlin essentially is trying to increase the penetration of renewables and photovoltaics by looking at the concept of the nanogrid. So in Berlin, we are combining photovoltaics with battery storage and with ICT in order to be able to promote further penetration of photovoltaics. And also an integral part of this scheme is also people. So we are also looking at the behavioral people in order to be able to essentially manage our electricity and our consumption production in a seamless way so that we can effectively increase the penetration. So before the nanogrid concept of the PV or the battery concept, you would waste the electricity from your photovoltaics through curtailment. Now, with this nanogrid concept, you can choose to consume your electricity on another load. You can choose to save your energy and store your energy in battery storage systems. And this is done automatically and seamlessly through this intelligent energy management system. And what is more, we have also incorporated e-mobility, so we can also charge our car in this way instead of losing the energy.
Now, if I remember rightly, because I have a feeling I actually came up to your laboratory last time round, and you showed me the systems that were in place. Let's say I live in a neighbourhood. I know a lot of neighbourhoods in Europe are doing this. Why can't I organise my neighbourhood into a nano grid so that we can share our res electricity between us?
This is something that you will be able to do in the near future because Europe is encouraging all that. Europe is encouraging the energy communities whereby individuals can come together and they can socialize the wealth. So yes, this is something that theoretically is possible in Cyprus right now, but we still do not have the regulation, we still don't have the framework for doing that. But theoretically, yes, you can do that.
Well, they do keep talking about rolling out smart metering for the EAC and so on. If a neighbourhood has smart meters, surely it's very simple then to pop photovoltaics on almost every roof and connect them to a nanogrid.
Yeah, theoretically, again, if you have the smart meters, that means you have the ICT and you have the intelligence and the visibility. One of the most important things is the smart meters. If you have the smart meters, then you know your consumption, you know your production at any time, and then you can decide how to manage your production or your loads. And this is essentially what we are doing through the nanogrid and through potentially microgrids and energy communities. The important point is to have the smart meters. The important point is to have the battery storage and to have an intelligent way of managing the energy.
Because you see, I think that this would be a solution in all our urban areas, George, because we don't really need, do we, to put huge, great solar parks up in the forests that we cut down in the mountains.
I personally think the same, to be honest with you, Rosie, and I think the beauty of photovoltaics and solar energy is that it's modular, and you can use it at the point where you need the production. So your rooftop, you're a producer, and then you can consume as much energy as you need, and you don't need to have big PV installations far away from your consumption.
Right, now let's come back to your Berlin project, because it was carried out with cooperation from other countries, I think, wasn't it? Tell us a little bit about that and the results.
Yeah, this was a project funded by the ENI program, and the partners were the University of Cyprus as the coordinators. We also had the Eilat and Eilot municipalities from Israel. We had the University of Cagliari from Italy and the University of Western Macedonia from Greece. And we also have our communication partner, which was Deloitte Cyprus. So what we did, we wanted to demonstrate the nanogrid concept in different settings. So in Israel, we did the nanogrid in 2 schools. So we had 2 pilots, one in Eilat and one in Eilot. In Greece and in Italy, we turned the university into a nanogrid, some parts of the university. Whereas in Cyprus, we turned our laboratory at the FOSS Research Center for Sustainable Energy into a living lab where we could test all these different concepts and people would be part of the whole experiment.
What problems, if any, did you come across? Because I guess that when you're at this sort of research stage, it pays in the long term if you manage to knock any problems on the head quickly.
Yes, we had a lot of problems, to be honest with you. We had a lot of challenges due to also COVID and the war in Ukraine, but also remember, these are new concepts. So, for example, the battery we have installed here at the lab is the only battery in Cyprus where you can model the grid. So we had to deal with new technologies, a lot of challenges, but we have managed to incorporate and integrate these different technologies into a living lab, which is now fully operational. And I would invite people to come and see the facility if they wish so.
Have you spoken to our new energy minister about this? He's very enthusiastic. I spoke to him a few weeks ago, and he knows about the problems with storage, for example, and seems to be determined to solve them. Have you managed to give him any insight into possible policy decisions?
Yes, the Ministry of Energy and the Energy Service are partners in this endeavor, and we are in close collaboration with them, and any results we have, we communicate with them as well. And in fact, one of the important aspects of our project is that we have set up like an advisory committee where essentially all the results we have, all the challenges, we communicate these challenges to them in order to be able to affect policy making and to inform policy making.
At the moment, with the cost of living crisis, I can only imagine that pretty well every citizen would look very seriously at doing something like what we've been talking about and installing community photovoltaics, because it's going to save them money long term, isn't it?
Exactly. This is the future. And remember, Europe has done this, the energy communities, in order to empower the citizens to be able to take advantage of the leaps in technology and also to take advantage of the fact that you can get cheaper electricity from your solar system than to buy from the network. So it's important to have active citizens and to be able to give this advantage to the people as well.
Well, perhaps the government will come up with some sort of scheme. I think the problem there is that in the past, when they've said that they will pay something towards the installation of photovoltaics, the money often didn't come through, did it?
Yes, but right now we have a different positive problem in that photovoltaics now is very cheap. If you buy your electricity from your own solar system, it's much cheaper than to buy it from the electricity network. So the problem now is to be able to have a resilient grid and electricity network so that we can have seamless penetration of more PV systems, and more people can take advantage of the cheap electricity offered by solar energy, which is a competitive advantage for the southern countries.
Let me just be clear on this. If somebody puts photovoltaics on their roof and uses it to run, I don't know, air conditioning in the summer or heating in the winter or whatever, they can't at the moment, I think, sell it back to the grid because it can't store it. Fair enough. But they still get cheaper electricity bills, even if some of what they generate is, in a sense, lost because they don't have batteries. Is that right?
Absolutely, and to be honest with you, the scheme we have in Cyprus right now, the net metering, is very favorable towards the people, because essentially when you produce, you give it to the grid, so the network stores the electricity, and when you need it at night, you draw it from the grid. So essentially, the network acts as an infinite battery. And to be honest with you, this is something very positive, which is it's a form of subsidy. It's giving the opportunity to the people to store their energy when they do not need it, and to draw it from the grid when they need it. And this will change, because people will have to install their own battery systems in the future to be able to do this operation.
Where does the Berlin project, or the people involved in it, go from here, George? You've finished. Is there another project in the offing? Is there anything that it didn't solve?
Yeah, we have big plans now. We are at the process of analyzing the data and trying to optimize our processes. And now we are also looking at incorporating green hydrogen and heat pumps into our nanogrid, in order to be able to take into consideration also seasonal storage and the different carriers which constitute the energy mix.
I think we need to know much more about all these different systems if we're going to contribute in any way to helping stop climate change, aren't we?
Absolutely, and I think this is a very important aspect that you touched on. People have to get more and more educated about the latest technologies and the new technologies coming, because we can all become part of the solution.
Well, you've certainly been a very big part of it with your project, George. Many thanks for taking time to join me today. That's Professor Georghiou from the University of Cyprus. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.